Some moments change a man's heart forever. The sight of a terrified child can break down walls built by years of hatred and war. In 1886, New Mexico Territory, an Apache scout finds a little settler girl hiding behind a water trough after a deadly raid. She whispers, "Please don't hurt me," while clutching her doll. Those words remind him of his own daughter, lost to disease years before. The warrior faces an impossible choice between his duty and his conscience. He must decide whether to follow orders or risk everything to save an enemy's child. What happens when the most unlikely pair must journey together through dangerous territory where both sides want them dead? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The acrid smell of smoke still hung heavy in the morning air as Mop walked through the ruins of Copper Creek Settlement. At 52 years old, his weathered face bore the deep lines of a man who had seen too much death, fought too many battles, and buried too many loved ones. The silver medicine pouch at his chest, crafted by his daughter's small hands, 3 summers ago, pressed against his heart with each careful step through the debris. Bodies lay scattered among the overturned wagons and smoldering cabin frames. Men, women, children. The familiar aftermath of another raid, another chapter in the endless war between his people and the white settlers. But this morning felt different. This morning, the weight in his chest had nothing to do with the smoke. In the air, Lieutenant Morrison emerged from behind a collapsed storefront, his blue uniform dusty and stained with ash. "Mop, there you are. We need to move out within the hour. The trail's getting cold, and Colonel Henderson wants those raiders tracked down before they reach the mountains." Mop nodded slowly, his dark eyes scanning the settlement. He had been scouting for the U.S. Army for nearly 5 years now, ever since the death of his wife and daughter left him with nowhere else to belong. Neither fully Apache nor fully accepted by the white soldiers, he existed in the space between worlds, useful to both, trusted completely by neither. How many dead? Mop's voice carried the quiet authority of a man accustomed to difficult questions. 17 confirmed so far, maybe more in the burned buildings. Morrison removed his hat and wiped his brow with a torn sleeve. Damn savages. Hit just before dawn. Took some livestock supplies. Could have been worse if the Hendricks family hadn't gotten word to the fort. The word savages sat heavy between them. Mop had heard it countless times, sometimes referring to his own people, sometimes to others. He had learned not to flinch, but the silver pouch against his chest seemed to grow heavier each time. Any survivors? Mop asked, though he already suspected the answer. Few made it to the root cellars. Old man Peterson's asking about his grandson boy was visiting from back east. Haven't found him yet. Morrison's voice softened slightly. Found Mrs. Chun hiding in the well house. Scared out of her mind, but alive. Mop walked toward the eastern edge of the settlement, where the wooden water trough sat beside what had been the general store. Something about the angle of the morning, shadows, the way the light fell across the churned earth, drew his attention. His tracking instincts, honed by decades of reading the land, told him to look closer. Behind the trough, partially hidden by scattered grain sacks and a broken barrel, he glimpsed a flash of blue fabric. Not the uniform blue of soldiers, but the soft, faded blue of a child's dress. His breath caught in his throat as he approached quietly, the way he might approach a wounded deer. The little girl couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Her blonde hair matted with dirt and tears, streaking clean paths down her smoke-stained cheeks. She clutched a cloth doll against her chest, simple thing, probably sewn by her mother's hands. When she saw him approaching, her blue eyes went wide with terror. "Please don't hurt me," she whispered, the words barely audible above the morning wind. The sound hit Mop like a physical blow. For a moment, he was no longer standing in the ruins of Copper Creek. but kneeling beside a small bed in his Apache village, watching smallpox steal the breath from his own daughter's lungs. Ayana had been 7 when she died. 7 years old, with dark eyes that held the same desperate fear he now saw in this white child's face. He reached slowly into his shirt and touched the silver medicine pouch, feeling the small shells and carved bone pieces his daughter had placed there during her final days. "For protection, Father," she had whispered with her dying breath, "so you won't be alone." But he had been alone. For 3 years, he had carried that aloneness like a stone in his chest, accepting dangerous scouting assignments that might have killed a younger man, hoping perhaps that one day he might join his family in whatever place the dead go to rest. Now, looking at this terrified child, something stirred in him that he thought had died with Ayana. "It's all right," he said softly in English, though his accent colored the words. He made no sudden movements, kept his hands visible. "I won't hurt you." The girl pressed herself harder against the wooden trough, but her sobs quieted slightly. The doll in her arms had dark yarn hair and a painted face worn smooth by countless embraces. Lieutenant Morrison's voice carried across the settlement. "Mop, what are you doing over there? We need to ride out." The child's eyes darted toward the sound, then back to Mop. He could see the calculation in her young mind, the desperate hope warring with learned fear. How many stories had she heard about Apache warriors? How many nightmares had her parents? Warnings created? "My name is Mop," he said quietly, settling into a crouch several feet away from her hiding place. "What's your name?" She didn't answer, but her grip on the doll loosened slightly. "That's a beautiful doll," he continued, remembering how Ayana had loved the small figures he carved for her from cottonwood. "Did your mother make it for you?" At the mention of her mother, fresh tears spilled down the child's cheeks. "They're gone," she whispered. "Mama and Papa are gone." The weight of those words settled over Mop like a familiar blanket of grief. He understood loss in a way that transcended language or culture. Pain spoke the same tongue, whether it came from an Apache village or a settler's cabin. "I know," he said simply. "I'm sorry." Something in his tone must have reached her, because she looked directly at him for the first time. "Are you going to scout me like in the stories?" The question should have stung, but Mop found himself thinking of his own daughter's questions about the white soldiers. "Will they burn our village, Father? Will they kill our horses?" Children learn fear from the stories adults told them. "No," he said firmly. "I'm going to help you. Mop." Lieutenant Morrison's voice was closer now, impatient. "The Colonel wants those tracks followed while they're still fresh." The child's eyes went wide again at the approaching voices. Mop could hear boots on gravel, the jingle of spurs and sabers. Soon Morrison would be upon them, and then what? A 7-year-old orphan would become another casualty, another problem for the army to solve with paperwork and bureaucracy. He thought of Ayana's final words about protection and not being alone. Perhaps his daughter had been wiser than he knew. Perhaps protection wasn't something you received, but something you gave. "Listen to me," he said urgently, leaning closer to the child. "I work with the soldiers. I can keep you safe. But you have to trust me. Can you do that?" The little girl looked at him for a long moment, her blue eyes searching his weathered face for some sign of truth. Finally, clutching her doll tighter, she nodded. Mop stood slowly as Lieutenant Morrison rounded the corner of the water trough, his hand resting on his sidearm. "What have you found here?" "Survivor," Mop said simply. "A child." Morrison's expression softened when he saw the girl. "Well, I'll be damned. Peterson's grandson?" "No," the child whispered. Lucy Thompson, from Kansas. Visiting relatives?" Morrison crouched down, his voice gentling. "Where are your folks, sweetheart?" Fresh tears answered his question. Mop felt the familiar ache in his chest, the one that had never quite healed since Ayana's death. Some wounds never close properly, just scarred over until something came along to split them open again. She's alone, Mop said quietly. Parents killed in the raid. Morrison stood, removing his hat again. Christ almighty. What are we supposed to do with a child out here? It was a practical question, asked by a practical man dealing with the harsh realities of frontier military life. But as Mop looked down at Lucy, still clutching her cloth doll against her chest, he found himself thinking not of practicalities, but of possibilities, of second chances, and the strange ways grief could transform into purpose. I'll take her to Fort Union, he heard himself say. She can't stay here, Morrison frowned. That's a week's hard ride through hostile territory. The colonel needs you tracking those raiders. The raiders will head for Mexico, Mop replied, his certainty born of years reading Apache tactics. They'll be across the border before we could catch them. But this child needs help now. Mop, 1 week, he continued, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had once commanded Apache war parties. I'll deliver her safely to Fort Union and report back. Lieutenant Morrison studied his face, perhaps recognizing something in the Apache scout's expression that hadn't been there before. After a moment, he nodded slowly. 1 week. But if the colonel asks, this was your idea entirely. Mop knelt beside Lucy again, extending his hand palm up. Are you ready to go on a journey? She looked at his outstretched hand, then at his face, and finally at the cloth doll in her arms. When she placed her small fingers in his weathered palm, Mop felt something shift in his chest. Not the heavy ache of loss he had carried for 3 years, but something warmer, something that felt almost like hope. All right, Lucy from Kansas, he said gently. Let's get you somewhere safe. The brass scout badge on Mop's chest felt heavier than usual as he approached Lucy's hiding place the next morning. The tarnished metal caught the early sunlight, a constant reminder of his divided loyalties, neither fully Apache nor truly accepted by the army he served. Each step toward the water trough was a step away from his sworn duty to track the raiders. Lieutenant Morrison had given him 1 hour to prepare for departure while the rest of the unit organized the dead for burial. 1 hour to decide whether duty to the U.S. Army outweighed the pull of a frightened child's tears. Lucy sat exactly where he had left her, the cloth doll still pressed against her chest. Her blue eyes followed his every movement as he settled onto his heels beside her makeshift shelter. Good morning, Lucy from Kansas, he said quietly. Are you ready to tell me what happened? She studied his face for a long moment before speaking. The screaming woke me up. Mama told me to hide under the bed, but then the house caught fire. Her small voice grew even smaller. I ran to the store where Papa worked, but he was... She couldn't finish the sentence, but Mama understood. How old are you, Lucy? 7. Almost 8. She hugged the doll tighter. Her name is Martha. Mama made her from Papa's old work shirt. 7 years old. The same age Ayana had been when the smallpox took her. Mop touched the silver medicine pouch beneath his shirt, feeling the familiar ache in his chest. Do you have family anywhere else? Aunts, uncles, grandparents? Lucy's face brightened slightly. Uncle William. He's a soldier like you, but at a big fort with lots of horses. Fort Union, I think. Mama said we might visit him someday. Fort Union. That was where Mop had planned to take her anyway, the closest military post with proper facilities for a child. But knowing she had family there changed everything. This wasn't just about finding her shelter. It was about reuniting her with blood kin. Uncle William sounds like a good man, Mop said. Would you like to see him? Lucy nodded eagerly, the first real emotion besides fear that he had seen from her. Will you take me there? It's very far, isn't it? Yes, it's far, and it won't be easy. We'll have to ride for many days through wild country. He paused, making sure she understood. There might be dangers. Other people who don't want us traveling together, because you're Apache and I'm white? Her directness surprised him. Most adults danced around such truths, but children often saw things more clearly than their elders. Yes, some people on both sides won't understand why we're together. Lucy considered this, her young mind working through implications that would challenge many grown men. But you're not going to hurt me. It wasn't a question, but a statement of faith that humbled him. No, Lucy, I will protect you with my life. Then I want to go with you. The simple trust in her voice nearly undid him. When had anyone last placed such complete faith in his word? Even among the soldiers he served, he remained an outsider, useful but never fully trusted. Mop. Lieutenant Morrison's voice carried. Across the settlement. Time to move. Lucy's grip on her doll tightened as she heard the approaching boots. Is he angry? No. He's a soldier, and soldiers have jobs to do. Mop stood slowly, extending his hand to help her up. But our job now is to get you to your uncle. She placed her small hand in his, and together they walked out from behind the water trough. Morrison stood waiting beside two horses, his expression unreadable. This is Lucy, Mop said formally. She's going to Fort Union to join her uncle. Morrison crouched down to Lucy's eye level, his voice gentle despite his stern appearance. Hello there, miss. I'm Lieutenant Morrison. That's a fine doll you have. Her name is Martha. Lucy's voice was barely above a whisper, but she didn't hide behind Mop. Martha's a beautiful name. Morrison glanced up at Mop. You'll need supplies. Food, water, blankets for the child. It's a hard week's ride to Fort Union. I have what we need, Mop replied. Though they both knew his usual traveling supplies weren't designed for a 7-year-old girl, Morrison disappeared into the ruins of the general store and returned with a canvas sack. Found some jerky, hardtack, and dried fruit that didn't get burned. There's a blanket, too, barely singed. He handed the supplies to Mop, then knelt beside Lucy again. You listen to Mop, you hear? He's the best tracker and guide in the territory. If anyone can get you safely to your uncle, it's him. Lucy nodded solemnly. Will you tell Uncle William I'm coming? If I can get word to Fort Union, I will. But you might beat my message there. Morrison stood and clasped Mop's shoulder. You sure about this? The colonel's not going to be happy about losing his best scout for a week. Mop looked down at Lucy, who was watching him with complete trust in her blue eyes. The brass badge on his chest seemed to pulse with each heartbeat, reminding him of duties and oaths and the military hierarchy that demanded obedience above all else. I'm sure, he said quietly. Morrison nodded. Then God go with you both. Within the hour, Mop had Lucy settled in front of him on his sturdy bay horse, her small frame fitting easily in the circle of his arms as he held the reins. The cloth, doll Martha was tucked safely between them, and Lucy's few belongings, a small Bible, a locket with her parents' pictures, and a wooden toy horse were secured in Mop's saddlebags. As they rode away from the smoking ruins of Copper Creek. Lucy twisted around to look up at him. Mop, that's not your real name, is it? The question caught him off guard. Most whites never thought to ask about Apache names, assuming the English versions were complete. My Apache name is Mopluda, he said. Red Cloud, but Mop is easier for soldiers to say. What should I call you? Whatever feels right to you, Lucy from Kansas. She was quiet for a long time as they rode through the scrub brush and scattered pinyon pines that marked the edge of settler country. The morning sun climbed higher, warming their faces and painting the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. My papa used to call me his little sage hen, she said finally, because I asked so many questions. Questions are good. They keep you safe in wild country. Were you always a scout for the soldiers? Mop felt the familiar tightness in his chest. How much truth could a 7-year-old handle? How much should he share about his past as an Apache warrior, about the battles he had fought against people who looked just like her? No, he said carefully. I was a warrior first. I fought to protect my people. Against the soldiers? Sometimes. Lucy absorbed this information with the serious consideration of a child, trying to understand an adult world full of contradictions. But now you help them. Now I try to help everyone stay safe. Like you're helping me? Yes, like I'm helping you. She settled back against his chest, apparently satisfied with his answers. The brass badge pressed between them felt less heavy now, less like a symbol of divided loyalty, and more like what it was meant to be, a sign of service to something larger than himself. The trail ahead wound through increasingly rough country, toward mountains where Apache war parties still roamed, and where a white child with an Apache escort might face dangers from both sides. But for the first time in 3 years, Mott felt a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with orders from superior officers or the complex politics of frontier military life. He was a father again, if only for a week. And that made all the dangers ahead feel worthwhile. As they crested a small ridge and the ruins of Copper Creek disappeared behind them, Lucy spoke again. Mop? Yes? Thank you for not leaving me there. He tightened his arms around her slightly, protective and warm. I would never leave you, little sage hen. That's a promise. The brass scout badge caught the sunlight one more time as they descended into the wild country beyond, but Map no longer felt its weight as a burden. Sometimes duty meant following orders, and sometimes it meant following your heart toward whatever redemption awaited on the far side of the mountains. The worn leather map tucked inside Mop's shirt had been drawn by his grandfather's hands, its careful markings showing safe passages through Apache territory that few white men knew existed. Each line represented knowledge passed down through generations, water sources, sheltered camps, and routes that avoided both military patrols and hostile war parties. As they rode deeper into the wild country beyond Copper Creek, that map became their lifeline. Lucy had been surprisingly quiet for the first few miles, content to watch the changing landscape from her perch in front of Mappa on the bay horse. But as the morning wore on and the sun climbed higher, her natural curiosity began to emerge. Why don't you live with other Apache anymore? She asked, her small hands gripping the saddle horn as they navigated a rocky stretch of trail. Mapi considered how to answer. The truth was complicated, too complicated for a 7-year-old who had already endured more loss than most adults. My family is gone, he said simply. When you lose your family, sometimes you need to find a new purpose. Like taking care of me, like taking care of you. She twisted around to look at him, her blue eyes serious. I don't have a family anymore either. Except Uncle William. Them we're both lucky, Mop said. You have Uncle William, and I have the chance to help you find him. The trail began to climb as they entered the foothills of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. Mop consulted his grandfathers. Map mentally, choosing paths that would keep them away from known military routes and Apache hunting grounds. The leather felt warm against his chest, a connection to wisdom earned through centuries of survival in this harsh land. By midday, they needed to rest both horse and rider. Map found a sheltered spot beside a small stream, hidden from view by a cluster of cottonwood trees. He helped Lucy down from the horse and watched her stretch her small legs. I've never been on a horse for so long, she said, rubbing her backside with childish honesty. It makes you sore. Mop smiled, the first genuine smile he had felt in months. It gets easier. My daughter used to complain about the same thing when she first learned to ride. You had a daughter? Lucy's eyes brightened with interest. What was her name? Ayana. It means eternal blossom in Apache. That's pretty. Was she like me? The question pierced him gently. In some ways, she was brave and asked many questions. She loved to hear stories about the old days. Lucy sat down beside the stream and dipped her fingers in the cool water. Would you tell me a story about the old days? Map settled beside her, keeping watch on the surrounding terrain while speaking. Long ago, before there were soldiers or settlers in this land, my people moved freely across these mountains. They followed the seasons, hunting in summer, gathering pinyon nuts in autumn, finding shelter in protected valleys during winter. Were they happy? Yes, they were happy because they lived in harmony with the land and each other. They took only what they needed and gave thanks for everything they received. Lucy picked up a smooth stone from the stream and examined it carefully. What happened to change it? People came from far away who saw the land differently. They wanted to own it instead of sharing it. They brought different ways of living, different ideas about what was right and wrong. Like my parents? The question hung in the air between them. Mop chose his words carefully, aware that he was speaking about her family, people she had loved and lost. Your parents were good people, Lucy. They came here looking for a better life, just like my ancestors looked for good hunting grounds. Sometimes good people can want different things and not know how to share. She nodded thoughtfully, the mature consideration strange in such a young face. Is that why there's fighting? Yes, but fighting isn't the only way to solve problems. What's another way? Mop looked at her. This white child sitting peacefully beside an Apache warrior by a mountain stream, sharing water and stories as if such a thing happened every day. Understanding, kindness, sometimes just listening to each other. Lucy smiled, the first truly carefree expression he had seen from her. Like we're doing? Like we're doing. They shared a simple meal of jerky and dried fruit from Lieutenant Morrison's supplies. Map showed Lucy how to cup water in her hands to drink from the stream and how to recognize edible berries growing on nearby bushes. She learned quickly, her natural intelligence sharpening under his patient instruction. My papa taught me some things about living outdoors, she said, carefully examining a service berry before eating it, but mostly just fishing and gathering eggs from our chickens. Those are important skills. Taking care of animals, knowing how to find food, these things keep you alive. Will you teach me more things? If you'd like to learn. As they prepared to continue their journey, Lucy grew thoughtful again. Mop, are you lonely? The question caught him unprepared. Adults rarely asked such direct, personal questions, but children seemed to instinctively understand the deepest truths. I've been lonely, he admitted, for a long time. Me too. Since yesterday, when Mama and Papa, she stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Mop knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. It's all right to be sad about losing them. Sadness is love with nowhere to go. Did you cry when your daughter died? Yes, for many months. Do you still cry sometimes? Sometimes, but less than before. Lucy considered this, then reached into her small bundle of belongings and pulled out the cloth doll Martha. When I'm really sad, I pretend Martha can talk to me. She says things Mama used to say. What kind of things? That I'm brave. That everything will be all right. That she loves me, even when she can't be with me. Mop felt something loosen in his chest, a knot of grief that had been tied tight for 3 years. Martha sounds very wise. She is. Would you like to hold her? The offer surprised him. Children rarely shared their most precious possessions with strangers, yet Lucy extended the doll toward him with complete trust. He accepted the simple cloth figure carefully, noting the careful stitches that had formed her face and the way her fabric body had been worn soft by countless embraces. She's beautiful, he said, handing her back. Your mother was skilled with a needle. She made all my clothes, too. And Papa's work shirts. Lucy hugged Martha close. I don't have anything left of them except her and some pictures. Sometimes. The things we carry in our hearts are more important than the things we carry in our hands, Mop said. Your parents' love for you, that travels with you wherever you go. They remounted the horse and continued up the mountain trail. The leather map against Mop's chest guided them toward a hidden valley where they could spend the night safely, away from both military patrols and Apache war parties who might not understand why an Apache scout traveled with a white child. As the afternoon shadows grew longer, Lucy began to tire. Her small body relaxed against Mop's chest, and her questions became fewer and farther between. When she finally dozed off, still clutching Martha, Mop felt a profound sense of responsibility settle over him. He had made many promises in his life, to his wife, to his daughter, to Apache war chiefs and army colonels. But this promise, whispered to a sleeping child as they rode through the wild country toward her uncle, felt like the most important he had ever made. The trail ahead would test them both. There would be dangers, hardships, and people who would question their unlikely partnership. But for now, in this moment, with the mountain wilderness spread out before them and a child's trust warming his heart, Mop felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 long years. He felt like he was exactly where he belonged. Lucy's wooden cross necklace caught the firelight as she knelt beside the small campfire Mop had built in the shelter of a rock overhang. The simple cross, worn smooth by her mother's fingers through years of prayer and worry, had become her anchor in a world suddenly stripped of everything familiar. She touched it often, usually without realizing, the way children touch talismans to connect them to lost parents. They had been riding for 3 days now, and Mop had begun to see traces of the spirited child Lucy must have been before tragedy struck. Her questions came more freely, her laughter emerged more easily, and she had developed the habit of naming everything they encountered: rocks, trees, even the horse, whom she had decided should be called Thunder because of his steady rumbling gait. "Tell me about your God," Mop said quietly as they shared their evening meal of rabbit he had snared and wild onions she had helped gather. The question surprised her, coming from a man she knew followed different spiritual traditions. Lucy fingered the wooden cross thoughtfully. "Mama said God loves everyone, even when bad things happen. She said he has a plan we can't always understand. Do you believe that? I want to." Her voice carried the honesty of childhood, unadorned by adult pretenses. "But it's hard to understand why his plan included Mama and Papa dying." Mop stirred the fire with a long stick, sending sparks up into the clear night sky where stars were beginning to emerge. "My people believe that the spirits of the dead watch over us from the star trails above. They guide us when we're lost and protect us when we're in danger." Lucy looked up at the darkening sky. "Do you think they can see each other? Your spirits and my God?" "I think love is the same everywhere, whether it comes from the stars or from the cross around your neck." She smiled at that, the first time he had seen her face truly light up since Copper Creek. "I like that idea." The sound of approaching hooves interrupted their quiet conversation. Mop was on his feet instantly, his hand moving to the rifle beside his bedroll. Lucy scrambled to his side, clutching Martha against her chest. "Stay behind." He murmured, his senses alert to every sound in the darkness beyond their small circle of firelight. 3 men emerged from the shadows on horseback, their faces weathered and hard. Mop recognized them as Mexican traders from their clothing and equipment men, who made their living crossing the dangerous borderlands between Mexico and the territories. They could be honest merchants or bandits. In this country, the difference often depended on opportunity and circumstance. The leader, a man with graying hair and a magnificent mustache, raised his hand in greeting. "Buenos tardes, amigos. We saw your fire and hoped you might share it. Cold night for traveling." Mop kept his rifle ready, but didn't aim it. "You're welcome to our fire. We have little food to spare." "We have plenty," the man replied, dismounting slowly to show peaceful intentions. "Perhaps we can share a meal and news of the trail ahead." The other 2 men followed their leader's example, moving carefully and keeping their hands visible. Lucy peered around Mop's protective form, her natural curiosity overcoming her fear. "I am Carlos Mendoza," the leader said, settling beside their fire with practiced ease. "These are my companions, Diego and Miguel. We trade between Santa Fe and the Mexican settlements to the south. I am Mapa. This is Lucy." Carlos nodded to Lucy with courtly politeness. "Senorita Lucy, it is a pleasure. You are very far from home, no? We're going to Fort Union," Lucy said before Mop could stop her. "To find my uncle." The three men exchanged glances, and Mop tensed. Information about destinations and family could be dangerous in the wrong hands. "Fort Union is still many days north," Diego said, pulling supplies from his pack. "Rough country between here and there." "We know the way," Mop replied carefully. Carlos studied them both with intelligent eyes. An Apache scout and a white child traveling together. Unusual, but then these are unusual times. He began preparing coffee in a battered pot. "You are wise to avoid the main trails. There are soldiers hunting Apache war parties, and war parties hunting soldiers. Peaceful travelers caught between them fare poorly." Miguel produced tortillas and dried meat from his saddlebags. "We have seen both sides preparing for conflict. The wise man stays clear of such troubles." As they shared the improved meal, Lucy's shyness gradually faded. The Mexican traders told stories of their travels, speaking of strange sights and interesting people they had encountered. Carlos, in particular, seemed to have a gift for storytelling that reminded Lucy of her father's bedtime tales. "In Taos, we met a woman who could predict the weather by watching her cat's behavior," Carlos continued, his eyes twinkling in the firelight. "When the cat washed behind its ears, rain would come within 2 days. When it slept curled in a tight ball, a cold snap was approaching." Lucy giggled, the first spontaneous laughter Mop had heard from her. "Really? A cat could do that? Si, Tacuega. Animals know many things we have forgotten. Your friend Mop here probably knows this truth." Mop nodded. "Animals feel changes in the air before we do. They are good teachers if you know how to watch." The conversation flowed easily as the night deepened. Diego spoke of the best watering holes along the southern routes, while Miguel shared remedies for trail injuries he had learned from various healers. Lucy listened intently, her wooden cross gleaming in the firelight as she leaned forward to catch every word. "You have a brave little companion," Carlos said quietly to Mop when Lucy had dozed off against his shoulder. "She has seen much sorrow. See? Her parents were killed in a raid 3 days ago." "Ah," Carlos crossed himself solemnly. "And you risk much taking her to safety. She is alone. Someone must help her." "Not someone. You." Carlos studied Mop's weathered face. "There are many Apache who would leave a white child to her fate. Just as there are many whites who would not trust an Apache with their precious ones. Why do you do this thing?" Mop was quiet for a long moment, listening to Lucy's steady breathing and feeling the weight of the wooden cross against his chest where she leaned against him. "I had a daughter once. She died of the white man's disease. If she had lived and found herself alone among strangers, I would hope someone would show her kindness." Carlos nodded slowly. "The heart recognizes its duties, Verdad? Even when the world says those duties make no sense." They talked quietly until the fire burned low, sharing stories of children lost and found, of the strange ways grief could transform into purpose. When Carlos and his men prepared to leave at first light, they left behind extra supplies, dried fruit, coffee, and warm blankets that would make the journey more bearable for a small girl. "Vaya con Dios, my friends," Carlos said as he mounted his horse. "May your path lead to peace." But their peace was short-lived. On the second morning after the traders had departed, Mop woke to the sound of approaching horses moving fast. He roused Lucy quickly and quietly. "Riders coming," he whispered. "Stay close to me." This time, there was no friendly greeting, No polite request to share a fire. 6 men emerged from the dawn, mist with weapons drawn, rough men with the hard faces of those who live by violence rather than trade. Their leader, a scarred man with cold eyes, smiled when he saw Lucy. "Well, look what we have here." A little white dove traveling with her pet Apache. Mop positioned himself between Lucy and the mounted men, his rifle ready. "We want no trouble." "Oh, but trouble wants you, Redskin. See, we heard tell of Mexican traders passing through with full packs and heavy purses. Thought we might relieve them of their burden, but they're long gone. You'll have to do instead. We have nothing of value." The leader's laugh was ugly. "That little girl's worth something to somebody. Pretty little thing like that might fetch a good price south of the border." Lucy's grip tightened on Mop's shirt, her wooden cross pressing hard against her palm. The familiar texture gave her courage to speak. "My uncle's a soldier. He'll come looking for me." "Your uncle's not here, sweetheart. Just you and your Apache friend against 6 of us." What followed happened with the swift brutality of frontier violence. The bandits spread out to surround their camp, confident in their numbers. They had underestimated both Mop's warrior skills and the protective fury that can drive a man beyond normal limitations. The first shot came from Mop's rifle, dropping the leader from his horse before the man could fully draw his pistol. The second came from Diego's Winchester. The Mexican trader had circled back when he heard the approaching riders, bringing Miguel with him. "Get the Niña to safety," Diego shouted as bullets began flying. Mop swept Lucy up and ran for the cover of nearby rocks, his body shielding hers from the chaos erupting around their campsite. She buried her face against his chest, her wooden cross the only solid thing. In a world suddenly full of gunfire and shouting, the fight was brief but fierce. When the gun smoke cleared, 3 of the bandits lay dead. 2 had fled wounded into the wilderness, and the 6th, the youngest, barely more than a boy, knelt with his hands raised in surrender. Carlos appeared through the dissipating smoke, his face grim but satisfied. "Are you hurt, little one?" Lucy shook her head, though she remained pressed close to Mop's side. "Why did they want to hurt us?" "Some men choose darkness over light, Picuega. But there are always others who choose to stand against such darkness." Diego tied up the surviving bandit while Miguel gathered the dead men's weapons and horses. It was a grim business, but necessary in country where law came from the barrel of a gun more often than from courthouse or badge. "We will take this one to the authorities in Santa Fe," Carlos said, indicating the young bandit. "Perhaps fear will teach him what conscience could not." As they prepared to part ways again, Carlos knelt beside Lucy. "Keep that cross close, Niña. It has protected you this day." Lucy touched the wooden cross at her throat, feeling its familiar smoothness. "It was my mama's first, then mine. She said it would keep me safe." "Your mama was a wise woman, and you are a brave girl to trust it and your Apache protector." Mop clasped Carlos's hand in gratitude. "Thank you for coming back. De nada, amigo. Sometimes we must choose sides between good and evil. Today, the choice was easy." As the Mexican traders rode away with their prisoner, Lucy looked up at Mop with new understanding in her blue eyes. "You could have been killed protecting me." "Yes, why would you do that?" Mop touched the silver medicine pouch over his heart, thinking of Ayana and the promise he had made to a frightened child behind a water trough in Copper Creek. "Because some things are worth the risk, little sage hen. Some things are worth everything." The broken arrow point lay half buried in the sandy soil of the abandoned Apache winter camp, its obsidian surface fractured but still sharp enough to draw blood. Mop picked it up carefully, turning the damaged artifact over in his weathered hands as memories flooded back unbidden. This place had once been home to his band circular depressions in the earth, marked where wickiups had stood. Fire-blackened stones showed where families had cooked meals and told stories. Through long winter nights, Lucy dismounted from Thunder and stood quietly beside him, somehow sensing that this place held deep significance for her traveling companion. She had learned to read his moods over their days together, recognizing when his silence came from watchfulness and when it came from grief. "People lived here," she said softly, not quite making it a question. "My people. 3 winters ago." Mop's voice carried the weight of loss that had become familiar to her. "Before the soldiers came. Before everything changed." She walked carefully among the remnants of the camp, her young mind trying to imagine families living here, children playing where now only sagebrush grew. Where did they go? Some to the reservation, some deeper into the mountains. Some? He stopped, unable to finish the sentence that would have ended with words like killed or captured. Lucy found a circle of stones that had obviously been a fire pit and sat down on one of the larger rocks. "Is this where your daughter lived?" "Yes, Ayana loved this place." She said the spirit spoke to her more clearly here than anywhere else. Mop settled beside her, still holding the broken arrow point. "She died in that wiki up there." He pointed to a depression near the camp center. "I held her as the fever took her, and she made me promise not to be angry anymore." Angry at who? At the white soldiers who brought the sickness. At God? Or the spirits for allowing it? At myself for not being able to save her. He studied the fractured obsidian in his palm. "She was 7 years old, like you." Lucy reached into her bundle and pulled out Martha, holding the cloth doll carefully. "When my mama got sick with the lung fever 2 years ago, I got angry too. I couldn't understand why she had to cough so much, why she got so thin. But she got better, and she told me that sometimes getting angry is just another way of loving someone." Mop looked at this remarkable child who seemed to possess wisdom far beyond her years. "Your mother sounds like she was very wise." She was. She said anger is like a broken arrow. It can still cut you if you're not careful, but maybe it can be fixed into something useful. He held up the fractured arrow point, seeing it differently now through Lucy's young eyes. Instead of a symbol of violence and destruction, perhaps it could represent something else. The possibility of mending what seemed irreparably broken. The sound of approaching horses interrupted his reflection. A single rider emerged from the scrub brush to the east, moving with the fluid grace that marked him as Apache even at a distance. Mop rose slowly, positioning himself protectively in front of Lucy while keeping his hands visible and empty. The rider was Knelt, a young warrior Mop had known since childhood. They had fought together in the old days, before Mop became a scout for the army. Knelt's face was painted for war, and his weapons were at ready, but he approached under the traditional signs of parley. "Mop Luda," Knelt said, using his full Apache name as he dismounted 20 feet away. "My heart is glad to see you alive, but my mind is troubled by what I see. Knelt, my friend, it has been too long." Mop kept his voice steady, respectful. "What troubles your mind?" The young warrior's eyes fixed on Lucy, who had pressed close to Mop's side but maintained her composure with remarkable courage. "You travel with a white child. The wind carries stories of Apache raids and dead settlers. Some say you have become so much the white man's dog that you steal their children for them. Some say many things. Few speak the truth." Mop's tone remained calm, but Lucy could feel tension radiating from his body. This child's parents were killed in a raid. She has an uncle at Fort Union. I am taking her to safety. Why? The question came with the directness of one warrior challenging another's actions. What is one white child to Mop Luda? Have you forgotten your own daughter, taken by their diseases? Lucy stepped forward before Mop could stop her, her small hand finding the wooden cross at her throat. He hasn't forgotten his daughter. He talks about her every day. He's helping me because that's what fathers do. They take care of children who need help. Nash stared at her, clearly surprised by her courage and directness. You speak boldly for a white child in Apache territory. I speak truly. Mop saved my life. He's teaching me how to survive in the wild, how to find food and water, how to read the signs of weather and danger. He's not a white man's dog. He's the bravest, kindest man I've ever known. The young warrior looked between Lucy and Mop, his painted face unreadable. The child defends you with the fierceness of a daughter. She has courage beyond her years, Mop agreed, and she has suffered enough loss. I will not add to it. Nige walked slowly around their small group, studying them from different angles like a man trying to solve a difficult puzzle. Finally, he stopped in front of Mop and extended his hand. Give me your weapon. Lucy gasped, but Mop placed a restraining hand on her shoulder. Why? Because if I'm going to let you continue this dangerous foolishness, I want to know that you trust me as much as this white child trusts you. Without hesitation, Mop handed over his rifle. Nate examined it briefly, then handed it back. You would have died rather than let harm come to her. Yes. And she would have fought to protect you, though she has no chance against the warrior. Yes. Nate nodded slowly. Perhaps there is more than one way to honor the dead. Perhaps sometimes we honor them by choosing to live differently than we did when they were alive. He remounted his horse and looked down at them both. The trail to Fort Union is watched by soldiers who will shoot any Apache on sight. But there is another path, through the high passes. More dangerous from weather and wild animals, but safer. For men who would not understand what I see here. Mop touched the silver medicine pouch over his heart. Thank you, old friend. Do not thank me yet. The path I speak of is hard even for experienced warriors. For a child, he shrugged. But, then, this is no ordinary child, is it? As Nate rode away, Lucy tugged on Mop's shirt. What did he mean about honoring the dead by living differently? Mop looked down at the broken arrow point still in his hand, then at Lucy's trusting face, and finally at the empty camp where his daughter had died 3 years ago. I think he meant that sometimes the best way to remember someone is to become the person they would have wanted you to be. What kind of person would Ayana have wanted you to be? He knelt down to her level, meeting her blue eyes directly. The kind of person who helps frightened children find their way home. The kind of person who chooses protection over revenge. The kind of person who can see past the color of skin to the heart underneath. Lucy smiled and reached out to touch the broken arrow point. Can you really fix something like that? Mop closed his fingers around the fractured obsidian, feeling its sharp edges and smooth surfaces. With patience and skill, yes. It might not be exactly what it was before, but it could become something new. Something different, but still useful. Like you? Like both of us, little sage hen. Like both of us. The frayed rope had seemed strong enough when Mop tested it that morning, its braided fibers appearing capable of bearing the weight of their supplies as they prepared to cross the swollen mountain stream. But as Thunder stepped carefully into the rushing water with Lucy clinging to the saddle horn, the rope that secured their essential gear to the pack horse suddenly snapped with a sharp crack that echoed off the canyon walls. Lucy watched in horror as their blankets, extra food, and medical supplies disappeared into the churning brown water, swept away by the spring runoff that had turned a normally gentle creek into a torrent. Within seconds, everything they needed to survive the remaining days to Fort Union was gone. Hold tight. Map shouted over the roar of the water as Thunder stumbled on the slick rocks beneath the surface. The horse recovered his footing, but not before Lucy had been soaked to the skin by the icy mountain water. By the time they reached the far bank, both horse and riders were shivering violently. Map's first concern was Lucy, whose lips had already turned blue from the cold. He wrapped her in his own dry shirt and began gathering deadwood for an emergency fire. I'm sorry, Lucy chattered through her violent shivers. I should have held the rope better. This wasn't your fault, Mop said firmly, his experienced hands working to create spark from flint and steel. The rope was old. I should have checked it more carefully. But Lucy had already begun to show signs of serious trouble. Her shivering grew more violent despite the fire he managed to coax to life, and her breathing became shallow and rapid. By evening, she was burning with fever, her small body racked by chills that the blazing campfire couldn't seem to touch. Mop had seen this before, the result of prolonged exposure to cold water and mountain air. In Apache camps, they called it the water sickness, and he had watched it kill strong warriors. If not treated quickly and properly, he gathered what medicinal plants he could find in the immediate area: a willow bark for the fever, pine needle tea for strength, wild mint to settle her stomach. But as the night wore on and Lucy's condition worsened, he found himself facing the same helpless terror he had felt 3 years ago, watching Ayanna slip away from smallpox. "Papa?" Lucy whispered in her delirium, reaching for someone who wasn't. "There. Papa, I'm cold. Where are you?" Mop's heart broke as he recognized the same confused calling that had marked his daughter's final hours. He pulled Lucy closer to his chest, sharing his body heat while applying cool claws to her burning forehead, the delicate balance between fighting fever and preventing more chills. "I'm here, little sage hen," he whispered, not knowing if she could hear him through the fever dreams. "I won't leave you." But as the long night stretched on, Lucy grew worse instead of better. Her breathing became labored, her fever spiked higher, and worst of all, she began calling for her dead parents. With increasing desperation, "Mama, Mama, where are you? I can't find you in the dark." Mop found himself praying to every spirit he had ever known: Apache mountain spirits, Christian God, anyone who might listen to the plea of a desperate father figure watching another child slip away from his protection. The silver medicine pouch pressed against his chest like a weight of failed promises. It was during the darkest hour before dawn that Lucy's fevered mind took her to places that terrified him. Her eyes opened but saw nothing of the present world, instead focused on horrors from the night her parents died. "Don't hurt them," she screamed suddenly, thrashing against his gentle restraint. "Please don't hurt Mama and Papa. I'll be good. I promise I'll be good." Mop realized she was reliving the raid on Copper Creek, experiencing again the trauma of watching her parents murdered. He held her carefully, speaking in both English and Apache, trying to reach through the fever to the frightened child beneath. "Lucy, you're safe. I'm here with you. The bad men are gone." "They're screaming," she whimpered. "Why are they screaming? Make them stop screaming." He began singing then, an old Apache lullaby his mother had sung to him, that he had sung to Ayanna during her illness. The melody was simple and repetitive, designed to soothe troubled minds and ease difficult passages between worlds. Gradually, Lucy's thrashing subsided. Her breathing remained labored, but the terrible visions seemed to recede slightly. She turned her face toward his voice like a flower following sunlight. "Mop?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here. Are you my papa now?" The question hit him like a physical blow. In her fevered state, Lucy had reached for the deepest need of a lost child, the need for someone to claim her, to take responsibility for her well-being, to stand between her and all the dangers of an uncertain world. "If you want me to be," he said quietly, tears he hadn't shed since Ayanna's death finally spilling down his weathered cheeks. "I do want that. But what if I die like your other little girl? What if you can't save me either?" Mop looked down at this remarkable child who, even in the grip of dangerous fever, worried more about his pain than her own suffering. "Then I will have had the honor of being your father for whatever time we have together, and that will be enough." Lucy managed a weak smile. "Will you teach me that song? The one you were singing? When you're better. When we reach your uncle at Fort Union. Promise? I promise." As dawn broke over the mountains, Lucy's fever finally began to break. Her breathing eased, her skin cooled, and for the first time in hours, she seemed to see him clearly. "I called you Papa," she said, embarrassment coloring her pale cheeks. "Yes, you did. Is that all right?" Mop touched the silver medicine pouch over his heart, feeling the sacred objects Ayanna had placed there during her final days. But instead of the familiar ache of loss, he felt something warmer, a sense that love doesn't die with the beloved, but finds new ways to express itself in an endless cycle of caring and protection. "It's more than all right, daughter," he said. Softly, "It's perfect." Lucy smiled and closed her eyes, finally falling into healing sleep as the morning sun painted the canyon walls in shades of gold and hope. The frayed rope lay forgotten on the riverbank, but what had seemed like disaster had instead become the moment when two wounded souls finally found their way to each other across the divide of grief and loss. They had lost their supplies, but they had found something far more valuable, a family forged not by blood, but by choice, commitment, and the kind of love that transcends every boundary the world tries to build between people. The faded daguerreotype had been hidden in the deepest fold of Mop's medicine pouch for 3 years, protected by sacred sage and wrapped in soft deerskin. The image was damaged. A crack ran diagonally across the metal surface, and the edges had begun to corrode, but Ayanna's face still smiled out from the photograph with the timeless joy of a 7-year-old girl who believed the world held nothing but wonder. Mop had never shown the photograph to anyone, not even to the army officers who had questioned him about his past or the Apache warriors who wondered why he chose to work with soldiers. It was his most private treasure, the one tangible proof that his daughter had lived and laughed and filled his world with purpose. But as they approached the trading post at Mora, 2 days after Lucy's fever broke, he found himself wanting to share this piece of his heart with the child who had become his daughter in all the ways that mattered. The trading post sat in a valley where 3 mountain trails converged, making it a natural stopping point for travelers, traders, and anyone seeking supplies or information. The main building was constructed of thick adobe walls with a wooden porch that had seen better days, but smoke rising from the chimney promised warmth and possibly hot food. "Are there people here?" Lucy asked, still weak from her recent illness, but alert and curious as they rode into the small settlement. "Good people, I hope," Mop replied, though his hand instinctively checked the position of his rifle. Trading posts could attract all kinds honest, merchants and dangerous men alike. The proprietor who emerged to greet them was a pleasant surprise. James McCready was a Scotsman whose weathered face spoke of decades on the frontier, but whose eyes held the kindness of a man who had chosen to help travelers rather than exploit them. His wife Sarah appeared in the doorway, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. "Welcome, friends," McCready called out in his distinctive brogue. "You both look like you could use a hot meal and a warm place to rest." "We need supplies," Mop said carefully, dismounting and helping Lucy down from Thunder. "Food, blankets, rope. We lost most of our gear crossing a swollen creek." Sarah McCready took one look at Lucy's pale face and drawn features and immediately took charge. "This child's been ill. Come inside where it's warm. I'll make some broth to build her strength back up." The interior of the trading post was wonderfully warm and filled with the comforting smells of cooking food and wood smoke. Lucy sank gratefully into a chair beside the fire while Sarah bustled around preparing food and McCready began gathering the supplies they needed. "Headed to Fort Union, are you?" McCready asked as he counted out portions of jerky and hardtack. "Yes," Lucy answered before Mop could respond. "To see my Uncle William. He's a captain there." "Captain William Hayes?" Sarah asked, looking up from her cooking. "Tall man with a beard and kind eyes?" Lucy's face lit up with the first real excitement she had shown since Copper Creek. "You know, Uncle William?" "Indeed we do, child." He stops here whenever his patrol route brings him through Mora. Fine man, your uncle. Speaks of his family back in Kansas often. Mop felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. What does he say about his family? McCready and his wife exchanged glances. Well, Sarah said carefully, he mentioned his sister and her husband were planning to bring their daughter west to visit him. Said he was looking forward to meeting his niece for the first time. That's me, Lucy said happily. Mama and Papa. We're going to take me to see Uncle William this summer. The trading post fell silent. McCready cleared his throat uncomfortably. Forgive me, lass, but if you're traveling to meet your uncle, where are your parents? Lucy's smile faded as the familiar weight of loss settled over her small shoulders. They were killed in a raid on our settlement. Mop saved me and is taking me to Uncle William. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, and McCready's expression grew grave. Child, I hate to be the bearer of more sad news, but Captain Hayes received word about a raid on Copper Creek. He's been organizing search parties, hoping to find survivors. He knows about the raid? Mop asked. Aye. A cavalry messenger brought word 3 days ago. But they said there were no survivors found among the civilian population. Lucy looked confused. But I survived. I was hiding behind the water trough. McCready knelt beside her chair, his voice gentle. The official report said all civilians were confirmed dead, including a young girl matching your description. Captain Hayes has been beside himself with grief, thinking he'd lost his only niece before ever meeting her. The implications hit Mop like a physical blow. If the army believed Lucy was dead, and if someone saw him traveling with a white child, who was supposed to be among the casualties, he could be accused of far worse than desertion. He could be charged with kidnapping or murder Dodd, as if summoned by his fears. The sound of multiple horses approached the trading post. McCready moved to the window and peered out, his expression growing tense. Sheriff Garrett and his deputies, he announced quietly. They've been patrolling this area looking for Apache raiders. Lucy started to rise from her chair, but Ma placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Let me handle this, he said quietly. Sheriff Garrett was exactly the type of lawman Mop had learned to fear during his years as an Army scout, a man who saw the world in simple terms of white and Indian, civilized and savage, with no room for the complex realities that actually governed frontier life. His cold eyes fixed on Mop immediately upon entering the trading post. Well, an Apache in civilized company. What's your business here, Redskin? I'm an Army scout, escorting this child to Fort Union, Mop replied evenly, though he could feel the familiar tension building in his chest. Garrett's eyes shifted to Lucy, and his expression changed from suspicion to outright hostility. That child's supposed to be dead. Killed in the Copper Creek raid 3 days ago. I'm not dead, Lucy said with the literal honesty of childhood. I was hiding, and Mop found me and saved me. Is that what he told you, sweetheart? Garrett's voice took on the false gentleness adults used when they thought children were being deceived. Did this Apache tell you he was saving you? Lucy's chin lifted with a stubbornness that reminded Map powerfully of Ayanna. He did save me. He's been taking care of me and teaching me things and protecting me from bad people. What I see, Garrett said, his hand moving to rest on his gumbutt, is a known Apache warrior traveling with a white child who's supposed to be among the dead. Makes a man wonder what really happened at Copper Creek. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a poorly tended fire. McCready stepped forward, his Scottish accent thick with indignation. Sheriff, I've known Mop for years. He served the Army faithfully as a scout and guide. Whatever happened at Copper Creek, this man isn't responsible for it. That's not for you to decide, McCready. I'm taking both of them into custody until we can sort this out. No. Lucy jumped up from her chair, moving to stand protectively in front of Mop. You can't arrest him. He didn't do anything wrong. He saved my life. Garrett's face softened as he looked down at her. Sweetheart, sometimes bad people tell children lies to make them cooperative. This Apache has probably been filling your head with stories. They're not stories. Lucy's voice rose with passionate conviction. Every night he tells me about his daughter who died, and how much he misses her, and how he wants to make sure I get to Uncle William safely. He could have left me to die, but he didn't. He chose to help me even though it was dangerous. Map felt his heart swell with pride at her fierce defense, but he also knew that her words weren't enough to overcome years of prejudice and the suspicious circumstances of their meeting. Garrett's hand had moved closer to his weapon, and the two deputies had spread out to cut off any escape routes. It was then that Map made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He reached slowly into his shirt and withdrew the silver medicine pouch, handling it with the reverence due to sacred objects. From its depths, he carefully extracted the faded daguerreotype of Ayana. "This is my daughter," he said quietly, offering the damaged photograph to Sheriff Garrett. Her name was Ayana. She died 3 years ago of smallpox when she was 7 years old. Garrett took the photograph, studying the smiling face of the Apache child. Despite the damage to the image, Ayana's joy and innocence shone through clearly. She was the same age as Lucy, Mop continued. When I found this child hiding behind a water trough, terrified and alone, I saw my daughter's face. I heard my daughter's voice. And I knew that somewhere in the spirit world, Ayana was asking me to do for this child what no one could do for her when she was dying. Lucy moved closer to look at the photograph, her eyes widening as she saw the face of the girl who had been so important to her adopted father. "She's beautiful," she whispered. "Yes, she was," Mop agreed. "And she taught me that love doesn't. And with death, it finds new ways to express itself. My love for Ayana led me to love Lucy. That's the only truth that matters." Sheriff Garrett stared at the photograph for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he handed it back. To Mop, "That's a touching story, Apache. But it doesn't change the facts. You're still traveling with a child who's supposed to be dead. And until I can verify your story with Captain Hayes at Fort Union, you're both coming with me." As Garrett's deputies moved to place Mop under arrest, Lucy grabbed the silver medicine pouch from his hands and clutched it against her chest. "If you arrest him," she said with the fierce determination of a child defending her family, "you arrest me too. Because I'm his daughter now, just like Ayana was. And daughters don't let their fathers face danger alone." The simple statement hung in the air of the trading post like a benediction, transforming the confrontation from one of law enforcement into something deeper, a conga test of whether love and loyalty could overcome suspicion and prejudice in a world too often governed by fear. The cavalry saber that Sheriff Garrett wore at his side gleamed in the afternoon sunlight as he prepared to place Mop in shackles. The ornate military sword represented everything that now threatened their journey-organized pursuit, official authority, and the violent resolution that awaited if they were caught and dragged back to face charges that could mean death for an Apache accused of murdering settlers. Lucy's fierce declaration that she would be arrested alongside Mop had momentarily stunned the sheriff and his deputies, but Garrett quickly recovered his composure. The child's loyalty, while touching, wouldn't change the facts as he saw them. "Little girl, you don't understand what's happening here," Garrett said with forced patience. "This Apache has filled your head with stories, but the truth is that good white folks are dead, and he was found with you afterward. That's what we call suspicious circumstances." "I understand more than you think," Lucy replied, clutching Mop's silver medicine pouch against her chest. "I understand that when bad men came to hurt me, Mop chose to protect me instead of letting me die. I understand that he's teaching me how to survive and how to be brave. And I understand that you want to punish him for being kind to me." McCready stepped forward again, his Scottish accent thick with emotion. "Sheriff, I've traded with folks from every walk of life for 20 years. I can tell you this, that child hasn't been harmed or frightened by her companion. She's been loved and protected." "McCready, you're interfering with official business." The conversation was interrupted by the thunder of approaching hooves. A large party of riders emerged from the northern trail, moving fast and kicking up clouds of dust. As they drew closer, Mop could see the blue uniforms of cavalry mixed with the war paint and traditional dress of Apache warriors, an unlikely combination that could mean either very good news or very bad trouble. "Sheriff." Garrett's hand moved instinctively to his saber as the mixed party of soldiers and Apaches surrounded the trading post. The leader of the group was a tall cavalry officer, with captain's bars on his shoulders and worry lines etched deep around his eyes. Behind him rode Nate, the young Apache warrior who had questioned Mop at the abandoned winter camp. "Captain Hayes," Garrett called out with obvious relief. "Perfect timing. I've got your dead niece here, alive and traveling with the Apache who probably killed her parents." The cavalry officer dismounted quickly, his eyes scanning the group until they fixed on Lucy. His weathered face went through a series of emotions: disbelief, hope, joy, and finally overwhelming relief. "Lucy?" His voice cracked with emotion. "Lucy Thompson from Kansas? Uncle William." Lucy broke free from the group and ran to him, still clutching Mop's medicine pouch. "I knew you'd come. I knew you'd find me." Captain Hayes swept his niece into his arms, holding her tight against his chest as tears streamed down his face. "Dear God, child, we thought you were dead." The report said no survivors, no children found alive. "I was hiding behind the water trough," Lucy said through her own tears of relief. "And Mop found me and saved me and has been taking care of me ever since." Captain Hayes looked over Lucy's head at Mop, his expression unreadable. "You're the Apache scout who's been traveling with my niece?" "Yes, sir." "Mop Luda, assigned to Lieutenant Morrison's unit at Fort Stenton." Mop stood straight despite the shackles Garrett's deputies had placed on his wrists. "I found your niece after the raid and have been escorting her to Fort Union to reunite her with family. Sheriff Garrett here seems to think you had something to do with the raid itself," Captain Hayes said carefully. "Papa didn't hurt anyone," Lucy protested, using the word that made every adult present take notice. "He saved me. He protected me from bad men who wanted to sell me. He took care of me when I got sick. He's been the best father anyone could ask for." Nate rode closer, his painted face serious. "Captain, I spoke with this man 5 days ago. He travels with the white child not as captive or prize, but as daughter. She defends him with the fierceness of bloodkin, and he protects her with the devotion of a true father." Sheriff Garrett looked between the Apache warrior and the cavalry captain with growing confusion. "Captain Hayes, surely you're not going to take the word of hostiles over official evidence." "What evidence?" Captain Hayes asked sharply. "A child who was supposed to be dead, but is obviously alive and healthy? An Apache scout with an exemplary service record who risked his own safety to bring her to me. The timing is suspicious." "The timing is irrelevant," Captain Hayes cut him off. "What matters is that my sister's child is alive and has been protected by a man who had no obligation to help her." Lucy tugged on her uncle's uniform sleeve. "Uncle William, they want to arrest Mop because they think he hurt Mama and Papa, but he didn't. He's been sad about it too, because it reminded him of when his own daughter died." Captain Hayes knelt down to Lucy's eye level, his voice gentle. "Tell me what happened, sweetheart." "All of it. Lucy's account of the raid, her discovery by Mop, and their journey together was delivered with the clear, honest detail that only children can provide. She spoke of learning Apache lullabies, of being protected from bandits, of fever dreams where Mop had stayed by her side like any devoted parent would. When she finished, Captain Hayes stood slowly and faced Sheriff Garrett. Sheriff, I see. No evidence of wrongdoing here. I see a man who found a terrified, orphan child and chose to risk his own life to bring her safely to family. But the official report was wrong, Captain Hayes said firmly. It happens in the confusion following raids. Bodies are misidentified. Survivors are missed. What matters now is that Lucy is safe, and the man responsible for her safety is being treated like a criminal. Naish spoke up from horseback. There is more you should know, Captain. Your Apache scout was not the only one who could have left this child to die. 3 Apache warriors encountered them during their journey. Each time, they chose to let them pass safely because they saw what Sheriff Garrett cannot, that love makes its own law. You're all making a mistake, Garrett insisted, though his voice carried less conviction now. This Apache has a history of violence. He fought against our people, as did I. Captain Hayes replied quietly. I'd fought against Confederate soldiers in the war between the states. Does that make me unfit to protect my niece now? Does past conflict negate present loyalty? Lucy stepped forward and held up Mop's silver medicine pouch. This has his daughter's sacred things in it. He shared them with me because he says love doesn't end when people die. It finds new ways to help. That's not something a bad person would do. Captain Hayes took the pouch from Lucy and examined it with respect due to sacred objects. When he handed it back to Mop, it was with the formal courtesy of one soldier acknowledging another's service. Sheriff Garrett, you will remove those shackles immediately. This man is under my protection and jurisdiction as a federal employee. Captain, I strongly protest. Your protest is noted and overruled. Mop Luda has served the United States Army faithfully for 5 years. He has risked his life on numerous occasions in service to this country. And now he has saved the life of my niece at considerable personal cost. If you have charges to bring against him, you'll have to go through proper military channels. As Garrett's deputies reluctantly removed the shackles, Lucy ran to Mop and threw her arms around his waist. I told you Uncle William was a good man, she said, with obvious relief. Ma P knelt down and returned her embrace, then carefully placed the silver medicine pouch back around his neck. Yes, little sage hen, you were right about many things. Captain. Hayes approached them both, his expression thoughtful. Lucy, you've been through more than any child should have to endure. But it sounds like you've had an excellent teacher in survival and courage. The best teacher, Lucy agreed. Can Mop stay with us at Fort Union? I don't want him to go away. Captain Hayes looked at the unlikely pair, the Apache scout who had found redemption through protecting an orphan child, and the little girl who had discovered that family could be chosen as well as born. I think, he said slowly, that Fort Union could use a man of Mop's experience and character, if he's willing to accept a permanent posting there. The answer in Mop's eyes was clear before he spoke. After 3 years of wandering between worlds, he had finally found where he belonged, wherever this remarkable child needed him to be. I accept, he said simply. As they prepared to continue the journey to Fort Union together, now as a proper family reunion rather than a desperate flight to safety. Lucy tugged on Mop's sleeve one more time. Will you still teach me that Apache lullaby you promised? Every night, daughter, he replied. Every night for as long as you want to hear it. The cavalry saber at Sheriff Garrett's side no longer gleamed with threat, but caught the afternoon. Sun like a symbol of justice properly served, not through punishment, but through recognition of the bonds that truly matter in a world too often divided by fear and misunderstanding. The eagle feather that Mappa withdrew from his medicine pouch was perfect in every detail, each barb precisely aligned, the shaft straight and strong, the colors shifting from deep brown to golden amber in the afternoon light. It was the last gift Ayana had given him, plucked from an eagle's nest she had discovered during their final hunting trip together. before the smallpox began its deadly work. "For protection, Father," she had whispered as she placed it in his hands with trembling fingers. "So the spirits will know you carry love with you always." Now, standing in the courtyard of Fort Union with Lucy beside him and Captain Hayes making introductions to the assembled garrison, Mop felt the weight of that sacred feather against his chest. 3 years of carrying it had brought him to this moment, surrounded by blue uniforms and curious faces, about to entrust his newfound daughter to the family she had been seeking. Fort Union was impressive in the way that military installations were meant to be solid, organized, and radiating the quiet authority of disciplined men accustomed to protecting civilization's edges. The adobe buildings were arranged in precise squares around a central parade ground, with stables, barracks, and officer quarters clearly marked by function and rank. Lucy pressed closer to Mop's side as soldiers gathered to witness the reunion. That had become the subject of considerable speculation. Word had spread quickly through the fort about the Apache scout who had rescued Captain Hayes's niece, and every face showed curiosity about this unlikely pair. "Nervous?" Mop asked quietly. "Ah, little," Lucy admitted. "There are so many people staring at us. They are curious, not hostile. Your uncle is well respected here. That respect extends to his family." Captain Hayes stepped forward to address the assembled soldiers. "Men, I want you to meet my niece, Lucy Thompson, and the man who saved her. Life, Scout Mopluda. They've traveled through dangerous country to reach us, and they deserve our respect and gratitude." A cheer went up from the gathered soldiers, and Lucy's nervousness began to fade as she saw genuine warmth in their faces. These were men who understood the value of courage and loyalty, regardless of the color of the skin that carried such virtues. But not everyone in the crowd shared the soldiers' acceptance. Mop noticed a cluster of civilian contractors and traders standing apart from the military personnel, their expressions ranging from suspicious to openly hostile. Among them stood a man whose cold eyes and calculating expression immediately put Mop on alert. "Captain Hayes," the man called out in a voice that carried the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "Samuel Morrison, territorial judge. I understand you have a situation here that requires legal review." Captain Hayes's expression tightened slightly. "Judge Morrison, I wasn't aware you were visiting Fort Union. I'd make it my business to investigate irregular situations involving civilian casualties and Apache movements. This situation qualifies as highly irregular." Lucy stepped forward before either Mop or her uncle could respond. "Sir, if you're worried about me being hurt, I can tell you that Mop never hurt me. He took care of me and taught me things and kept me safe when bad people wanted to sell me to Mexico." Judge Morrison's smile was thin and condescending. "Child, you've been through a terrible ordeal. Sometimes victims develop misplaced loyalty toward their captors. It's a recognized phenomenon." "I wasn't captured," Lucy said, with the stubborn honesty that had become her trademark. "I was rescued." Nevertheless, the legal facts remain unchanged. This Apache was found in possession of a white child following a raid that killed numerous settlers. The circumstances require investigation. Mop felt the familiar tension building in his chest, the same feeling he had experienced when Sheriff Garrett questioned his motives. But before he could respond, Lucy reached into his medicine pouch and carefully withdrew the eagle feather. "Judge Morrison," she said with the formal politeness her mother had taught her, "this feather belonged to Mop's daughter who died 3 years ago. She gave it to him for protection. He gave it to me when I was sick with fever. It helped me get better. Now I want to give it back to him so everyone can see what kind of man he really is." She held the eagle feather up so the assembled crowd could see it clearly, then turned to Mop with eyes that held wisdom beyond her 7 years. "Tell them about Ayana, Papa. Tell them what she taught you about love." Mop accepted the sacred feather from Lucy's small hands, feeling its familiar weight and texture. The gathered soldiers and civilians grew quiet, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. "My daughter Ayana was 7 years old when she died," he began, his voice carrying clearly across the courtyard. "She was curious about everything, brave beyond her years, and kind to every living creature she encountered. When the smallpox came to our village, she faced death with more courage than many warriors show in battle." He held up the eagle feather, letting the afternoon light play across its surface. "She found this feather during our last hunting trip together. She said it was a sign from the spirits that love never dies. It just changes form and finds new ways to help." Judge Morrison shifted impatiently. "That's a touching story, but it doesn't address the legal. When I found Lucy hiding behind that water trough," Mop continued, ignoring the interruption, "I saw Ayana's face in her tears. I heard Ayana's voice in her frightened whispers. And I knew that my daughter's spirit was asking me to do for this child what I couldn't do for her. Keep her safe and help her find her way home." Captain Hayes stepped beside Mop, his voice firm with conviction. "Judge Morrison, I see no legal issues here. I see a federal employee who went beyond the call of duty to save my niece's life. I see a man who honored his obligations to both his conscience and his country. Captain, with all due respect, you're emotionally compromised by family ties. The territorial government requires an objective assessment of the territorial government," interrupted a new voice. "Will find no fault with Scout Mapluta's actions." All heads turned toward the fort's main gate, where a small party of Apache leaders rode under a white flag of truce. At their head was an elderly chief whose bearing commanded immediate respect from everyone present. Mop recognized him as Cochise's son, a leader whose word carried weight with both Apache bands and federal authorities. The chief dismounted and approached the gathered crowd with the dignity of a man accustomed to treaty negotiations. "I am Knelt, speaker for the Apache peoples who remain at peace with the United States government. I have come to speak for Mapluta, who has served both peoples with honor." Judge Morrison looked uncomfortable with this unexpected development. "Chief Knelt, this is a matter for civilian courts, not tribal. This is a matter of truth," Knelt replied calmly. "And truth recognizes no boundaries between peoples. Mapluta found a white child in danger and chose protection over abandonment. He faced hostility from both sides to bring her safely to family. These are not the actions of a criminal, but of a man guided by the highest principles." Lucy stepped forward and offered the eagle feather to Chief Knelt. "This was his daughter's. She died when she was my age. He says love doesn't end when people die, it finds new ways to help. Will you tell the judge that Mop is good?" Knelt accepted the sacred feather with appropriate reverence, then looked directly at Judge Morrison. "This child speaks truth with the clarity that only innocence possesses. She has not been harmed by her protector, she has been blessed by him. To punish such a man would dishonor both Apache and American justice." The tension in the courtyard was palpable as Judge Morrison weighed his options. The assembled soldiers clearly supported Mop. Captain Hayes had claimed military jurisdiction, and now an Apache chief had vouched for the scout's character. Public opinion was clearly against any legal action. Finally, Judge Morrison nodded. Reluctantly, "Given the unusual circumstances and the testimony of all parties involved, I find no grounds for criminal charges. However, I expect Scout Mapluta to remain available for future questioning if additional evidence emerges." Lucy clapped her hands with joy and threw her arms around Mop's waist. "You're safe. We're both safe." As the crowd began to disperse, Chief Knelt handed the eagle feather back to Mop. "Your daughter's spirit chose well when she guided you to this child. May you both find the peace that has eluded you." Captain Hayes approached them with a smile that transformed his weathered features. "Well then, It seems we have some celebrating to do. Lucy, would you like to see your new home? Our new home, Lucy corrected, taking Mop's hand firmly in hers. Right, Papa? Mop looked down at this remarkable child who had become his daughter through choice rather than blood. Then at the eagle feather in his other hand, Ayana's final gift that had indeed provided protection, just not in the way anyone might have expected. Yes, daughter, he said softly. Our new home. The treaty document that Captain Hayes spread across his desk 3 hours later was more than just an official agreement between the United States Army and various Apache bands. It represented hope for a different kind of future, one where understanding might replace violence and where individual acts of courage could influence the larger currents of history. Lucy sat in the corner of her uncle's office, carefully mending a tear in Martha's dress with needle and thread that Mrs. Hayes had provided. The fort commander's wife had welcomed her with the warmth of a woman long accustomed to caring for soldiers' families, and Lucy felt the first stirrings of true security since her parents' death. The territorial governor wants a formal peace conference, Captain Hayes explained to Mop and Chief Nate, who had remained at the fort to discuss broader implications of recent events. Your journey together has attracted attention in Santa Fe. Officials are calling it a symbol of what's possible when people choose cooperation over conflict. Mop studied the proposed treaty terms. His reading skills improved through years of military correspondence, but still laborious when faced with legal language. What would be expected of me? Your presence at the conference. Your testimony about how Apache and American interests can align when both sides choose honor over hatred. Captain Hayes leaned back in his chair. Frankly, your story with Lucy has done more to advance the cause of peace than 6 months of military campaigns. Chief Nate nodded thoughtfully. The young ones on both sides need to see that another path exists. Too many have known only war. They think violence is the only language between peoples. Like I used to think, Mop said quietly, glancing at Lucy as she worked. Before I learned that love can be stronger than anger. The door to the office opened, and Judge Morrison entered without invitation. His expression was carefully neutral, but tension radiated from his bearing like heat from a forge. Captain Hayes, I need to speak with Scout Mapaluta privately. Anything you need to say to my scout can be said in front of me and Chief Nate. Captain Hayes replied coolly. Very well. Morrison's tone carried barely concealed frustration. I've received additional information about the Copper Creek raid. Information that suggests this situation is more complex than initially reported. Lucy looked up from her mending, sensing adult undercurrents she didn't fully understand. What kind of information? Judge Morrison ignored her question, focusing on Mop. Did you know that the raid on Copper Creek was led by Apache warriors you had previously served with? Warriors who might have recognized you among the Army scouts. Tracking them? The question hung in the air like smoke from green wood. Mop felt every eye in the room turn toward him, waiting for his response to this new accusation. I knew some of the raiders, yes, he said calmly. I recognized tracks and tactics from my time as a war leader. And yet you chose to save a white child instead of warning your former companions that the Army was pursuing them. I chose to save an innocent child because it was the right thing to do. Or, Morrison suggested with the tone of a prosecutor, building his case, you chose to save her because you knew your former comrades would return for her. Because Apache war parties sometimes take captives for later ransom or exchange. Lucy stood up abruptly, her small hands clenched into fists. That's not true. Mop didn't know anyone was coming back. He was just as surprised as I was when those bad men tried to take me. Lucy, Captain Hayes said gently, let the adults handle this. No. Her voice carried the righteous anger of a child who had heard enough lies. I was there. I saw everything. Mop could have left me to die, but he didn't. He could have traded me to those bandits, but he fought them instead. He could have given up when I got sick, but he took care of me like I was his own daughter. Judge Morrison's expression softened slightly as he looked at her passionate defense. Child, I'm not saying he intentionally harmed you. I'm suggesting that his motives might have been more complex than simple kindness. His motives were simple, Chief Nash interjected quietly. Love, grief transformed into protection. Recognition that all children deserve safety, regardless of their parents' skin color. Words are easy, Chief. Actions reveal true intentions. Then judge him by his actions, Lucy said, moving to stand beside Mop's chair. He gave me his food when I was hungry. He sang to me when I was scared. He shared stories about his daughter when I missed my parents. He taught me how to find water and gather berries and read weather signs. He risked his life to protect me from men who wanted to sell me. Those are the actions of a father, not a kidnapper. Captain Hayes stood and walked to the window overlooking the fort's parade ground. Judge Morrison, I've heard enough. My niece was orphaned by violence and saved by compassion. The man responsible for her survival deserves gratitude, not suspicion. Captain, the territorial government requires. The territorial government, Hayes interrupted, can focus its attention on the real criminals. The bandits who tried to kidnap my niece are still at large. The raiders who killed her parents have never been brought to justice. Yet you're here questioning the man who prevented further tragedy. Morrison's jaw tightened with frustration. I'm trying to ensure that justice is served properly. Justice? Lucy's voice cracked with emotion. Justice would be thanking Mop for saving me instead of trying to punish him for being kind. She ran to Mop's side and threw her arms around him, tears streaming down her cheeks. Don't let them take you away from me, Papa. You're all the family I have left. Mop held her close, feeling the familiar weight of the silver medicine pouch against his chest. Inside it, alongside Ayana's sacred objects, he now carried a small stone. Lucy had given him smooth river rock she had found during their journey, a token of their shared experiences. No one is taking me anywhere, little sage hen, he said. Firmly, we're home now. We're safe. Chief Nash stood and placed his hand on the treaty document. Judge Morrison, I speak for the Apache peoples when I say that Mop Luta's actions honor both his heritage and his service to the United States. To punish such a man would damage any hope of lasting peace between our peoples. And I speak for the United States Army, Captain Hayes added, when I say that Scout Mop Luta has earned our respect and protection through years of faithful service, culminating in his rescue of my niece. Judge Morrison looked around the room at the United Front opposing his investigation. Finally, with obvious reluctance, he nodded toward the treaty document. Very well. Given the broader implications for territorial peace negotiations, I'll recommend that no further action be taken in this matter. He paused at the door. But I want it understood that this decision is based on political necessity, not personal sentiment. After Morrison left, Lucy wiped her eyes and looked up at Mop. Are we really safe now? Yes, daughter, we're really safe. She smiled and returned to her corner to continue mending Martha's dress. Good, because I was running out of ways to defend you. Adults ask very complicated questions about simple things. Captain Hayes laughed, the first genuinely relaxed sound he had made all afternoon. Lucy, I think you may be the wisest 7-year-old in the territory of New Mexico. Almost 8, she corrected with the precision of childhood. And Martha helped me think of what to say. She's very good at understanding people. Chief Nash examined the treaty document one more time before signing it. When the peace conference happens, will you bring the child? Her words today carried more conviction than many speeches I have heard. If she wants to come, Mop replied, looking at Lucy with pride and affection. Will there be other children there? Lucy asked, looking up from her sewing. Probably not. Then yes, I want to come. Someone should speak for the children on both sides. We're the ones who have to live with whatever the grown-ups decide. As the sun set over Fort Union, casting long shadows across the parade ground, Mop felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years: absolute certainty about his place in the world. He was no longer caught between Apache and American identity, no longer carrying unresolved grief, no longer searching for purpose. He was exactly where he belonged, with exactly the family he was meant to protect. And tomorrow they would begin building the kind of future Ayanna had dreamed of when she gave him that eagle feather. A future where love proved stronger than fear, and where the bonds between people mattered more than the differences that seemed to divide them. The hand-carved wooden horse that Mop was carefully shaping with his knife had taken him 3 weeks to complete. Each evening after his duties as chief scout and peace negotiator were finished, he would sit on the porch of the small house Captain Hayes had provided for him and Lucy, working by lamplight to create something beautiful from a simple piece of cottonwood. 6 months had passed since their arrival at Fort Union, and both their lives had settled into rhythms that felt as natural as breathing. Lucy attended the fort's small school with the children of soldiers and civilians, where her quick mind and determined spirit made her both a good student and a natural leader among her peers. Mop had found his role as cultural liaison between Apache visitors and Army officials both challenging and deeply satisfying. "What do you think, Martha?" Lucy asked her cloth doll as she practiced writing her letters on a slate tablet. "Is my mood better today?" The doll's painted face offered no comment, but Lucy seemed satisfied with whatever silent wisdom she received. At 8 years old, now her birthday had been celebrated with a party that included both Apache and Army children. She had grown taller and more confident, though she still carried Martha everywhere and still wore her mother's wooden cross. "Your mom looks perfect, little scholar," Mop said, holding up the nearly finished wooden horse for her inspection. "What do you think? Is he ready to join the other horses in your collection?" Lucy set down her slate and examined the carving carefully. Mop had been creating wooden animals for her. Throughout the winter, a bear, an eagle, a rabbit, and now this sturdy horse with flowing mane and alert ears. "He's beautiful, Papa, but he looks lonely. Don't horses like to be with other horses?" "Usually, yes, but sometimes a horse finds its purpose by carrying someone special to places they need to go." He handed her the finished carving. "Like thunder carried us to each other." Lucy accepted the wooden horse with the reverence she always showed for Mop's gifts. Each carving represented hours of patient work, but more than that, they represented the continuing expression of love between father and daughter. "Will you teach me to carve?" she asked, running her fingers along the smooth wood. "If you'd like to learn. Your hands are growing strong enough to handle a knife safely. I like that very much." The peaceful evening was interrupted by the approach of a familiar figure. Captain Hayes walked up the porch steps with a letter in his hand and an expression that mixed excitement with concern. "Good evening, Lucy, Mop. I have news from Santa Fe that affects both of you." "Good news or complicated news?" Lucy asked with the perceptiveness she had developed over months of living in a military environment. "Both, I think. The territorial governor has formally invited you both to address a gathering of territorial leaders and Apache chiefs next month. It seems your story has traveled far beyond Fort Union, and people want to hear directly from you about the possibilities for peaceful coexistence." Mop set down his carving tools and considered the implications. "What kind of address?" "They want you to tell your story, how you found Lucy, why you chose to help her, what the journey taught you both about bridging differences between peoples." Captain Hayes sat down on the porch steps. "The governor thinks your experience could influence policy decisions about Apache-American relations." Lucy looked up from examining her wooden horse. "Would I have to give a speech too?" If you wanted to, but only if you wanted to. She was quiet for a moment, her young mind working through the complexities of adult expectations. What would I say? Whatever feels true to you, Mop replied. Whatever you think people need to hear about how different kinds of people can become family. I think, Lucy said slowly, that I would want to tell them about Martha. Captain. Hayes looked puzzled. About your doll? About what Martha taught me. When Mama made her from Papa's old work shirt, she said Martha would help me remember that love makes everything into family. Even old cloth and stuffing can become something precious if someone loves it enough. Lucy hugged the wooden horse against her chest. That's what happened with us, isn't it, Papa? Love made us into family even though we started as strangers. Mop felt the familiar warmth in his chest that came whenever Lucy's wisdom surprised him. Yes, daughter. That's exactly what happened. Captain Hayes smiled. Lucy, I think the territorial leaders need to hear that message. The world has too. Many people who focus on differences instead of possibilities. Over the following weeks, as they prepared for the journey to Santa Fe, Mop watched Lucy practice her speech with Martha as her audience. She spoke simply and directly about love transcending boundaries, about the difference between being rescued and being chosen, about how families could be created through commitment rather than blood. The peace conference itself was both more formal and less intimidating than Mop had expected. Territorial officials, military leaders, Apache chiefs, and civic leaders gathered in the governor's mansion to hear testimony about successful cooperation between previously hostile groups. When Mop stood to address the assembly, he spoke of Ayana's death transforming his anger into purpose, of finding healing through service to someone who needed protection, of learning that peace came not from winning conflicts but from choosing when to lay down weapons. But it was Lucy's speech that truly moved the gathering. Standing beside the podium with Martha in her arms, she spoke with the clarity that only children possess when they address fundamental truths. My mama made Martha from pieces of Papa's old work shirt after he died in an accident back in Kansas. She began, her clear voice carrying easily through the silent assembly. Mama said that love could make anything into something precious, even old cloth and cotton stuffing. When my mama and Papa were killed in the raid, I thought love was gone from the world. She paused to touch the wooden cross at her throat, gathering courage. But then Mop found me hiding behind the water trough, and he could have left me there to die. Instead, he saw past my white skin to the scared little girl underneath. He chose to love me like his own daughter, even though helping me was dangerous for him. The assembly listened with rapt attention as this remarkable child continued. Now I have a new Papa who teaches me Apache words and carves wooden animals for me, and sings me lullabies in a language I'm still learning. And he has a new daughter who helps him remember that love doesn't end when people die. It finds new ways to keep growing. Lucy held up Martha for everyone to see. Some people say Apache and white folks can't be family because we look different or have different ways of living. But Martha taught me that love makes its own rules. If love can turn old cloth into something precious, it can turn strangers into family too. When she finished, the silence in the room lasted several heartbeats before Territorial Governor William Mills began to applaud. The ovation that followed was long and heartfelt, with many of the hardened officials and military leaders wiping tears from their eyes. The formal result of the conference was a new treaty framework that emphasized cooperation over conflict, cultural exchange over segregation, and individual relationships over institutional mistrust. But the real result was something harder to measure: a shift in how people thought about what was possible between groups that had long considered each other enemies. On the journey back to Fort Union, Lucy sat quietly in the wagon beside Mop, playing with the wooden horse he had carved for her. The peaceful landscape rolling past them, mountains and meadows, streams and forest, seemed to reflect the calm that had settled over their corner of the New Mexico territory. Papa," she said finally. "Do you think Ayana would be happy about how things turned out?" Mop considered the question seriously, as he always did when Lucy asked about his deceased daughter. "I think she would be very happy. She always believed that love was stronger than anger, and that good things could grow from sad beginnings. Like us. Like us. Like us." Lucy smiled and leaned against his shoulder as the wagon rocked gently along the familiar trail. "Will you really teach me to carve wood when we get home? I promised I would, didn't I? What should I make first?" "Whatever speaks to your heart, little sage hen. The wood will tell you what it wants to become." As they crested the final hill before Fort Union came into view, Lucy sat up straighter and pointed ahead. "Look, Papa, there's our home." Mop followed her gaze to see the familiar adobe buildings and neat squares of the military post where they had found safety, purpose, and a future neither of them could have imagined 6 months earlier. Smoke rose from chimneys, horses grazed in paddocks, and people went about their daily business in the comfortable rhythm of a community at peace. "Yes, daughter," he said, feeling the truth of those words settle into his bones like warmth from a well-tended fire. "There's our home." That evening, as they sat together on their porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple, Lucy began her first wood-carving lesson. Under Mop's patient guidance, she carefully shaped a small piece of cottonwood with a knife that had been sized for her smaller hands. "What are you making?" he asked as her carving began to take recognizable form. "A little girl and an Apache warrior," she said with the matter-of-fact tone of childhood, "standing together so everyone can see that different people can be family." "That's a good choice. Martha suggested it," Lucy replied seriously. "She says some truths are so important they need to be carved in wood so they last forever." Mop smiled and returned to his own carving, a small eagle with outstretched wings, a companion piece to the wooden horse and other animals that had become Lucy's treasured collection. Each carved figure represented a memory, a lesson learned, or a hope for the future. As the stars emerged in the darkening sky, Lucy set down her carving tools and leaned against Mop's shoulder. "Papa?" "Yes?" "Thank you for not leaving me behind that water trough. Thank you for trusting me enough to come with me. Thank you for becoming my papa. Thank you for becoming my daughter." She giggled softly. "We could say thank you all night. We could. But I think Martha is getting sleepy, and you have school tomorrow." Lucy picked up her cloth doll and her partially completed carving, then paused in the doorway. "Papa, will you sing me that Apache lullaby tonight?" "Every night, little sage hen. For as long as you want to hear it." As they went inside their small house, a home filled with wooden carvings, carefully mended dolls, Apache artifacts, and the accumulated treasures of a family created by choice rather than birth, Mop reflected on the strange paths that had led them to this moment of perfect contentment. 3 years ago, he had been a man hollowed out by grief, existing rather than living, carrying his daughter's memory like a wound that wouldn't heal. Now he was fully alive again, with purpose and love and hope for whatever tomorrow might bring. The hand-carved wooden horse sat on Lucy's bedside table beside Martha and the wooden cross that had belonged to her mother. Different traditions, different origins, different meanings, but all united by the love that had transformed a terrified orphan and a grief-stricken warrior into the family they were always meant to become. Outside their window, the New Mexico territory slept under a blanket of stars, and in the morning there would be new lessons to teach, new carvings to create, and new ways to build the peace that both of them had helped to nurture. But for now, as Mop's voice carried the ancient Apache lullaby through their small home, it was enough to be exactly where they belonged together, safe, and surrounded by the kind of love that changes everything it touches.